Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. I've gotten over them. And today I want to talk to you about books in conversation with each other. And I want to explain what I mean by that. And to do so, I think I have here 8 pairs of books. And I'm pairing these books not because I want to prescriptively tell you, oh, in order for you to get the most out of this book, you really have to read this book. But I want to say, for me, reading is a hobby, and I love the richness of reading books. And when I find books in conversation with each other, either very obviously or more obliquely, I find that very satisfying, very enriching, and I love following up on those threads and thinking about the ways that authors have been in conversation with other authors on the page. And the reason I talk about this, we are, I believe, a community of readers, and it's important to remember that the authors that we read are also part of that community, and sometimes they make it obvious that they have reading lives, which then funnel into, they channel through their writing lives. But for us, as for me, who's just a reader and not a writer, I want to really enjoy that sense that the person whose words I'm reading has also read and explored and encountered other ideas, in this instance specifically other novels, and how that has enriched and informed their the way they've approached a particular subject or the way they have presented a particular idea. So, as I say, these are all pairs of books. Some of them will be fairly obvious at the beginning, and then I think I get a little more oblique towards the end. And as I say, it's not that you have to read one or you'll never understand the other. That's not. I really try very hard not to be prescriptive. Everyone should do the reading they like and should live their best reading lives. But I want to tell you my experience of having read these pairs of books has been enriched by that understanding or that slow realization that they are connected. So in this instance, this was fairly obvious, and this was laid out from the start. This was a retelling of The Adventures of Huck We have this year's James by Percival Everett, and I made a video when I reviewed James, and I think about it more and more, how the revelations, and I don't want to give away spoilers, but the direction that Everett takes here, I think must go back and inform how we now look and read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I'm not saying for one second that the changes James makes or the new ideas that James brings were really what Twain intended all along, but I think this, having read Huckleberry Finn, reading James was a joy, but having read James, I come to my memory and my thoughts about Huckleberry Finn and his relationship with Jim completely differently. It's refreshed, it's renewed. I think these books, it's not just a retelling, as this was pitched, that's a marketing type of word, a modern retelling. It's actually books in conversation with them. When you hear Everett's explanation of how he read and reread, and then when he came to writing, he put this down, and the conversations and the ideas he had were taken from memory, because he was really in conversation with the book rather than retelling it or rewriting it or looking at it from a different perspective. 2 fantastic works, I think a great example of an author in conversation with another author, in this instance separated by 100, 120, 150 years, something like that. James and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Another super obvious one from recent years, Demon Copperhead and David Copperfield. Again, I'm not telling you that in order to appreciate Demon Copperhead, you must read David Copperfield. What I am telling you is that David Copperfield is a magnificent, to me, I haven't read all of Dickens, but I think it's his crowning achievement of what I've read so far, and I've got more to go. It's so readable, it's so personal, it's so intimate, and enriched my reading of Demon Copperhead, which is its own standalone. This, again, it's not a retelling. These are marketing phrases. These are people trying to sell you books. Yes, King Solver was inspired by David Copperfield. Yes, there is an idea of the self-made man, of the hero of one's own story. These are 2 different stories, but the one enriches the other. And this modern hero, and Demon Copperhead is nothing if not a hero of his own life, enriches my understanding and appreciation of David Copperfield. Two books, again, 150, 200 years apart. No, it can't be that much. When was David Copperfield? 150, 170 years maybe, 1850s, something like that, usually, or late 1800s. Oh God, I can't read a thing without my glasses. Mid 19th century, and then to 2023, 2024. So a good 170 years between them. But the conversation that exists between these two novels is because Kingsolver is a reader who has read and appreciated and absorbed, and then found ways to craft something new and original, but in conversation with an earlier work. Another obvious one that people will come back to, and again, not prescriptive, not telling you how to do, but I urge you to explore and enjoy the richness of discovering these works. Jane Eyre, my beloved Jane Eyre, and this is my copy that I bought in 1989 when I was 18 years old, 19 years old, and read and fell in love with this story and this terrible things that happened to this wonderful creature, and the crowning achievement, those 4 words that start the last chapter, which possibly the most romantic, the most satisfying ending, and I don't think it's necessarily the right choice for this young woman, but it's which overwhelmed me as a late teenager, the possibilities and the belief in the goodness and the faithfulness and the open-heartedness of this creature. And then, of course, when you get through all this and you're moon-eyed and you think, wow, this is what love must be, through all conquers all, and throughout the hardness and the toughness and the lessons learned, taken out physically on Rochester for his sins, and the end result. And then we have Jean Rhys writing White Sargasso Sea, where we throw out these 2 creatures that we fell in love with and watch their story, and think about this misbegotten creature locked away in the attic, and find a backstory and a life and these, this does not exist without this. This is a beautiful novel in its own right. This is a beautiful novel in its own right, and the conversation between them makes me look at fiction and the writing of fiction and the reading of fiction with fresh eyes, because of what is possible, that we could have something which seemed to me the embodiment of perfection and Victorian beauty and love, and it's not even cynical, but a twist on that, a sense of what are you looking at, what is taking up your attention, and why are we not considering this? And I can enjoy each of them separately, but having read them both, my world is richer for it. There was a lot of buzz around this book in 25 years ago. The Hours by Michael Cunningham, I think, it won a bunch of prizes, and I picked up this copy in a London bookshop. This was a new hardback, and it cost me £1.99, which probably because it wasn't being widely read in the UK, and this was in a remainder shop. And I loved the fact that I found such a cheap copy of the hardback, but I knew I could not read and enjoy The Hours by Michael Cunningham until I had actually read Mrs. Dalloway. And again, could not. If you want to read The Hours by Michael Cunningham, go read The Hours, go watch the movie, live your best life. For me, the reading experience of this was enriched by the beauty of the day and life of Clarissa Dalloway. And I'd had a fractious relationship with Woolf, and in so many ways I still do. That I studied to the Lighthouse for my A-levels in my last year or two of high school, and so it was assigned reading. I did not get on with it for the life of me, and had to write essays about it, and the interminable dinner party scene and the stream of consciousness, and it just was not anything that I had acclimatized to as a reader. It was right, and so I just thought, well, Woolf is not for me. But in order to read The Hours, I said, well, I must find and buy a copy of Mrs. Dalloway and read that first. And I'm so pleased I did. This was a richer experience for having read each of these books on their own and understand or having an attempt at understanding the conversation between them. That is Mrs. Dalloway and The Hours by Michael Cunningham. Here is more happenstance. I studied King Lear also when I was doing my A-levels. This was one of our assigned plays. We did King Lear and Othello. And King Lear is a fabulous, rich, terrible tragedy about a man driven mad by his children. I couldn't possibly relate, but a man so full of pride that perhaps tragedy was the only possible outcome. And having read and studied King Lear and enjoyed that more than I enjoyed To the Lighthouse, then this book popped up and won the Pulitzer Prize, which was not a prize. This is going back to when this comes from, the mid-90s. So while I was still living in the UK, so the Pulitzer Prize was not something that particularly attracted me. I was following the Booker Prize then. But seeing this won an award, I picked up 1,000 Acres by Jane Smiley, which is, in some ways, a retelling of King Lear, a man who tells his 3 daughters that he will divide their inheritance based on who loves him the most and who will declare their love for him. And this is an American novel set in Iowa. This is a farmer with a lot of land dying, and the way the 3 daughters, the Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia of his life interact and play out reflects what happens in King Lear. Let me be not mad, and yet they are driven mad. A play in this instance and a novel in conversation with each other. My experience of both enriched. I had studied King Lear, so I felt good about that. So I went into 1,000 Acres. This is very early on in my reading career. This is 30 years ago. But I was able to enjoy this and start seeing what modern literary fiction had to offer because I had done the work and written and investigated what was happening in King Lear and understanding and internalized that story and what Lear's tragedy is. And so I was able to approach something like 1,000 Acres with a fuller and broader understanding of what literature can do and how it leans and is in conversation with the past. Now I've got 3 more pairs of books for you where the connections are less obvious, but for me at least, I think I can't be the first person to recognize the links between these books, so I'm not making any great claims on that score. But I enjoy the fact that my reading has encompassed both these things. Let me start with a couple of recent novels. One of them is the beloved Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, who I've been reading for 30 years since I started reading him with The Remains of the Day, went back to one of his earlier novels, and then have read everything since. And I think Clara and the Day may be one of his, this is post winning the Nobel. I think maybe one of his greatest works. I still favor The Remains of the Day over Never Let Me Go, which I know gets a huge amount of love. But Clara and the Sun, I think, is fabulous. And I believe very much in conversation with Machines Like Me by Ian McEwan, which is not McEwan's greatest work. I think Lessons, his most recent novel, was a fabulous return to form. I would go back to some of McEwan's earlier work, Enduring Love, Atonement, undeniably one of those great books of the 21st century. But these are books where the authors, who are I believe friends, certainly contemporaries and acquaintances and literary part of a similar cohort of literary brethren with Rushdie, with the late Martin Amis, with the late Christopher Hitchens, and McEwan's book came out I think before Clara and the Sun, and these are books about grappling with AI, what AI will do, what it means to be human, how we relate to our spirit and our soul and our thought, and how these things define who we are and maybe define the next 20, 30 years of humanity. And I love the fact that these books, or these authors, may well have had some of these conversations and then gone and written their books. And I think when I came to Clara and the Sun, which I think I'll say, I think is a better book than Machines Like Me. But having read both of these outstanding authors and seen their take, I felt a richness and a clearer understanding of what it was they were trying to say, and therefore what it was that I wanted to take away and think about and turn over and review in my mind. That's Machines Like Me and Clara and the Sun. Another pair of books, which, and I don't remember, I think I read one of these before the other. So I think I came first to the Spoon River Anthology, just as a book that was recommended to me. I get so dry talking. Sorry. I came to Spoon River Anthology, which is described variously as a work of poetry. It's a collection of very short pieces where each one of them is a small piece about someone who is buried in the Spoon River graveyard, I believe. Each chapter is a name of somebody, and in a page or half a page, we get some backstory about their life and who they were and what they represent. And I can't remember one of these names, but it has a kind of sort of our town feel to it, where the banality and the mundanity of each of these people's lives is stands for the beautiful variety of humanity, and from beyond the grave, the wistfulness and the remembrance of what life was, and the regrets and the honest appraisal of what a life meant is aggregatively hugely moving and rewarding. And this is a fantastic work. And to my mind, there is no doubt that when George Saunders sits down to write his first full-length novel, having sort of mastered the art of the short story and become probably the world's greatest living short story writer in the UK, in the English language, maybe taking over from Raymond Carver, who's operating on a totally different level, on a different register. But having decided to sit down and write a novel, there's no doubt in my mind that Saunders is informed by these voices from beyond the grave to come up with the myriad voices that exist in the Bardo, as Lincoln lays his son to rest and visits him, not wanting to let go. There is that same wistfulness for life, that appreciation only in the afterlife of what we've missed and what could be lost. Banal and bizarre characters whose lives might have been small, but they belong to a single person, and therefore they are an entire world, however small they may be in context, in the way the rest of the world sees them. For that person, they are an entire universe, and that's very much thematically true of both these books and the characters that inhabit them. And I think my coming to Lincoln in the Bardo, which I think I came to a couple of years after I happened to stumble across Spoon River Anthology, very much informed that sense of that little is a whole universe to that person, and so there are no small lives. And I find that quite moving and meaningful. And lastly, two books which it would not have struck me to think of them in conversation with each other, and yet in the reading experience, I found, well, I feel like I've read something like this before. There's something very familiar. The two books I'm talking about here are War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy and Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. So Vanity Fair comes out in 1847, 1848, and War and Peace is 20 years later. But there is no doubt, and I read War and Peace first, and War and Peace is remarkable. Tolstoy is to my mind the greatest of the Victorian writers that I've read, because he does all the things that the Victorians do, and the way people interact and the way emotions build and disappointments loom and resolution is achieved, but there's darkness in there as well. He does it so brilliantly. The tiniest sense of how one's feelings are tapped and interest is piqued, and how that plays out, and how the inner workings of these characters in the tiniest way is outstanding. And then also we have these huge graphic war scenes with young men for their honor riding into battle, and turns out honor not worth a whole lot when cannons are being fired at you. Incredibly moving, just a fantastic work, really mind-expanding work of literature. My throat just gets dry. And then when I read Vanity Fair, which doesn't go, the off-to-battle scene in Vanity Fair doesn't end up in the same way as the off-to-battle scene in War and Peace. In Vanity Fair, the battle takes place completely off the page, whereas War and Peace, the bullets are flying and we're right with the riders, and they gallop, young and feeling invincible, gallop into war. But that pre-scene of the self-doubt and the thrill and the sense of living a life worth living is very, very similar. And I'm reading Vanity Fair and thinking, wait, this is so familiar. And then, of course, I found out that War and Peace, written 20 years after Vanity Fair, of course Tolstoy had read Thackeray. Of course he had absorbed Vanity Fair. Of course this sense of the small and the vast juxtaposed, the tiny lives and the silly loves, and then the huge, incomprehensibly vast idea of countries going to war with each other. This tiny little thing, people in love and exchanging a handkerchief and tokens of affection, and then being part of an army galloping into war. This is what both these books are engaged with on different levels and telling different stories. But in conversation with them, my enjoyment of Vanity Fair, which was enormous, was suddenly enhanced by the idea that I've seen this play out in a different way. I've seen these same ideas that lives are both small, a whole universe. Each person's life is a whole universe, but then you can also be a tiny cog in a whole other machine, and that's who we are. We all contain multitudes, and the best authors, or the best authors that I've read, are able to dig this out and put it on the page and find ways to tell these stories. And again, I'm not a literary scholar. I have no idea if no or an enormous amount of work has already been done on comparing and talking about Thackeray's influence on Tolstoy. I think I Googled it enough to say that I'm not the first person to have noticed whether this is actually a sort of literary trend that PhDs have been based on. I couldn't tell you, but to my mind, there was a completeness in having read War and Peace by the time I got. Perhaps you should read Vanity Fair before War and Peace if you want to be chronological about it. But just seeing these books in conversation with each other was terribly rewarding for me. And that's it. That's all I want to say. The more I read, the more I see everything is connected. The more I notice that the authors whose work I am reading are mostly readers also. I think it's worth remembering. Maybe I'm drawn to those authors who are readers. That could be a thing. But I find that enormously rewarding, that idea that, yes, at some point, every one of these authors that I've really enjoyed has sat down and enjoyed something else and got something out and is bringing that into their work. Just some ideas. I'm just ranting or raving on a Friday morning. Hope you're all keeping well. God bless. Bye.